Hi everyone, welcome back. So let's start to put some of these concepts all together. So far we've reviewed critical tasks, we've looked at standards and benchmarks, we've looked at competency models and frameworks, and lastly we've looked at rubrics. And we've used the basic competency of written communication to consider how one elementary competency, which is writing an executive summary, might be evaluated. We've looked at what it is, how it might fit into this overall sense of what an evaluator's perspective might look for. And it's really important for you to know and use best practices and include consistent use of clear and grammatically correct language and attention to context and be well organized. So we know this about what sort of good writing looks like. And also, for example, you should have an ability to succinctly and coherently summarize, organize, present varying pieces of information into one cohesive document. And then the trick is have that document speak to different organizational levels, including senior personnel or maybe an audience might not be as familiar with the industry jargon. So again, bringing together some of these ideas, how do expert evaluators use some of these tools to assess needs, gaps, and strengths in their own organization? The idea is not to exhaustively review, but rather to change our mindset a little bit, to think from an evaluator's perspective and get an idea of what some of these tools are. And, of course, most importantly, how to use the tools to evaluate prospective employees and their competencies like you, because after all, the goal is to get a job and make your employment brand bigger and wider. So there are multiple ways experts assess, and here's one. Competency assessments. We've heard the word competency a few times now. So competency assessments might use one or more of the tools we've so far discussed to paint a very broad picture of what employers want from prospective employees. And just as by way of background, the use of competencies can be traced back to the 1970s. The researcher David McClelland argued that the best predictor of job success was sort of neither intelligence nor credentials or the college degree you might have, but rather your ability to perform according to identified criteria and competencies. It's important to understand that because that sort of predicts the trends moving forward from that time. And there are many types of assessments. And the assessments can, for example, often simulate job scenarios to determine how an applicant performs under certain situations. So it can be a performance based on predefined competencies and behavioral indicators, and the list of job skills forms the basis of competency assessment. So typically a competency assessment focuses on how well an employee is performing the required job in relation to specific performance standards. So it's that performance piece that's important. So for example, the Office of Personnel Management for the U.S. government discusses the use of work samples and simulations. And that tests both broad and narrowly defined competencies and either broad or narrowly defined simulations. So you might be tested to see how you respond to a situation where you're confronted by an upset or hostile customer. And you would have to quickly decide how to respond in that moment. So that's sort of the simulation piece. It's more like an on-the-spot role play versus a case-based job talk, which might be given to a candidate in advance. In fact, that's what happened with me when I interviewed for the position in which I currently operate. So using the competency we're discussing, a prospective employee might be asked to write a short executive summary after reading a number of reports. And then the simulation would test how you would respond under some pressure. So how do you cogently write? How do you assess important information, summarize, and so forth? And again, you might be able to locate samples of assessments provided by an expert evaluator in the area for which you are interested, for example, writing in your field. And find examples of exemplary performance. And expert evaluations can be one of the reasons to take a formal course or attend a professional workshop to kind of give you a sense of what all of this means in a context. So next, we'll look at job descriptions and interviews. See you soon.